All right, I just want to go through one problem where we go through how to find all the graphical features we talked about in class. So I'm going to go ahead and use this graph. This is the last example we had in class. Let's talk about domain first. So domain, remember you're going, in fact, let me get something first. I like to draw kind of a vertical line when I'm dealing with domain just to visually help me. So domain, you're trying to figure out what x values this function includes. So if I draw this vertical line and I just drag it across, you'll notice that there's never a point on this left side because of this arrow that this straight line is not touching the graph. It continues to go and go and go until we get to this point right here where it terminates right here. So since there wasn't a beginning point or an exact point on the left side that we start at, we'll say that we started at negative infinity. But since it terminates right here, this is at the value positive 3. We'll go ahead and say 3. And since we're using interval notation, you don't include infinity symbols, so we use a parenthesis, but we are including this point since it hits right at 3. So I use a bracket. Now range, I do kind of the same idea, except now I do a horizontal line since we're dealing with y values. So notice right here, because the arrow is going up forever, there's actually a gap. There's nothing below this coordinate right here at -1. So we know our range is going to start at -1. And we do include -1 since it's touching, or this coordinate is actually at -1, or a y value. It has a y value of -1. But as you go on, as we keep on going up, because of this arrow on the left side right here, this horizontal line will always be touching the function at some point, because this graph continues on and on forever. That means our maximum y value would be positive infinity. And we don't include that, so I put a parenthesis. X-intercepts, I need you to name them as coordinates, so I'm just going to go ahead and name these coordinates right here, wherever it crosses or touches the x-axis. So there are 3 of them. Now, just guesstimate if it's not right on a value. So I'm going to go ahead and say this is about -2.50. This one is -10. And then this last one is at 30. Y-intercept, there's only one since this is a function. You can't have more than one. So it's right here at 0, 1. All right, end behavior. Now end behavior, I only need you to write the end behavior if there is an arrow on that side. So since it terminates on the right side, we're not going to state anything for the right side, but I'm going to make a statement for the left side. For the left side, you always start with the statement as x approaches, and since we're on the left side, we say negative infinity because our x's are negative on the left side. So we just need to fill in what y is approaching. Well, since the arrow keeps going on and on forever, we'd say positive infinity. It keeps going up, so it's going to a positive infinity. All right, now that we've done our end behavior, let's switch over to increasing, decreasing, and constant. You'll notice you always read the graph left to right. There's only one section from this coordinate to this point where the graph is increasing. So I just need to name that interval, and remember you need to name it in terms of the x values. So the x value of this coordinate is -2, so we're going from -2, and we'll go all the way to the x coordinate of this, x value of this coordinate, which would be +2. So we're increasing from -2 to +2. We don't include the coordinates where we start and stop, and so we use parentheses for that interval. Decreasing, there are 2 intervals. So there's this interval right here, decreasing, and then this one right here. We're going to name them as separate intervals. So for this interval, since there isn't a starting point or starting coordinate, and we're off to the left and we're dealing with x values, we'd say we're starting at negative infinity. And then you keep going until you get to this point, the x coordinate, once again to that x value of that coordinate is -2. Now the other one, this is +2 right here. So we're starting at +2, and it does terminate on this side, and it terminates at +3. There are no constant intervals, so we don't have to name anything for that. Next, we're going to go to positive and negative. Remember, positive means that the graph is above the x-axis. And there are actually two separate intervals where it's above the x-axis. So there's this first interval right here up until this x-intercept. And then there's also this interval from the x-intercept at -1 all the way to the x-intercept at 3. So we actually need to name both of those separately. So I'm going to go ahead and name this one. Remember, we're writing this in terms of x. So since there's an arrow right here, I'm going to go ahead and say we're starting at -infinity, we're describing the x values. It's on the left side, all the way to roughly -2.5. Keep doing that. Once again, you don't include the value that's on the x-axis because this value on the x-axis is neither positive nor negative. Okay, so we go to the next one. We have -1, so we start at -1 and we go all the way up until +3. Which means the interval where it's negative would just be this little interval right here from -2.5 to -1. Okay, when it comes to maxima and minima, maxima, you're looking for any peaks. And all you need to do is name all the y values of those peaks. So this peak right here has a y value of 3. So I'm going to go ahead and say there's a maxima at 3. Now there are no other peaks. Arrows don't count as peaks. So we're done there. Minima, you look for values. So I should indicate that was the max. So now we're going to look for the minima. We have a value right here. There's our minima, our local minima. I'm not looking for absolute or global maxima and minimas. So this one, we named the y value. So we're trying to figure out what the lowest value of the function is in this region, and that is -1. Now symmetry, all I'm asking is there origin symmetry? Is there x-axis or y-axis symmetry? And there actually isn't any of those. There aren't any of those, so you just say there's no symmetry and you're done with that. So that's just an example problem to help you with your homework.